Step out of the car, now. The voice boomed like a command from a war zone, not a suburban street. 17-year-old Jalen Morris froze, his fingers still gripping the steering wheel of his mom's dusty Corolla. The red and blue lights behind him spun like warning sirens in a storm, painting the world in chaos. He was 2 blocks from home. He had just finished basketball practice. His gym bag sat in the passenger seat, damp with sweat and the scent of hard work. A Gatorade bottle rolled across the floorboard. And yet, here he was, caught in a spotlight he didn't ask for. "Did I do something wrong, officer?" he asked, keeping his voice level. The cop didn't answer. He didn't have to. Officer Dwayne Mercer walked up with a swagger that reeked of certainty, not about the law, but about his dominance over it. "You fit the description," Mercer said, eyes darting to the back seat. "Description of what?" Jalen asked calmly. Mercer tapped the side of the car with his flashlight. Black male, hoodie, driving suspiciously through a white neighborhood. Jalen blinked. He was wearing his school team sweatshirt. His route home never changed. "Sir, I live around the corner." "License and registration," Mercer snapped. Jalen moved slowly, deliberately, like his dad had taught him. No sudden movements. "Narrate everything. I'm reaching into my glove compartment now. Just do it." He pulled out the papers, handed them over. Mercer didn't even look. "Step out." "Is there a reason?" Mercer leaned in closer. "Do I look like I owe you reasons?" Jalen stepped out, keeping his hands visible. "Turn around." He did. "Spread your legs. Wider." Jalen complied. Mercer patted him down aggressively, then turned to the car and began rummaging through it without consent. "Sir, I didn't give permission to search." Mercer ignored him. He opened Jalen's gym bag, pulled out a metal pencil sharpener with a detachable blade, held it up like he'd found a bomb. Well, what do we have here?" Jalen frowned. "It's a pencil sharpener, sir." "From school." Mercer smirked. "Looks like a concealed weapon to me." "What?" "You're under arrest for possession of a dangerous object and resisting stop and question." "I didn't resist anything." Mercer grabbed his arm and slammed him onto the hood of the car. Jalen winced but didn't cry out. Not this time. 2 neighbors peeked out from their windows. No one came out. No one said a word. The fluorescent lights inside the station hummed like insects. Jalen sat in a holding chair, wrists cuffed, staring at the speckled tile beneath his feet. Across the desk, Mercer typed his report with the enthusiasm of a man building a case out of air. Suspect displayed erratic behavior, reached for object under seat. Found in possession of sharpened metallic blade concealed in gym bag. Suspect verbally aggressive and combative during stop. Possible gang affiliation under investigation. Jalen couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You're lying," he said. Mercer didn't flinch. "Prove it." One officer eventually uncuffed him to let him make a call. Jalen picked up the phone and dialed home. His mother answered. "Jay, where are you?" "Coach said you left hours ago." "I'm at the station, Fairview Precinct." "What? What happened?" "I got stopped. They said I had a weapon." "Mom, they're lying." She didn't speak for a moment. Then came her voice, steady but furious. "Did you tell them your name?" "Yes." "And you stayed calm?" "Yes." "I'm coming now." "Wait, don't bring Dad." She paused. "Why not?" "Because if he shows up, this place might not survive it." That night, Jalen sat at the dinner table, silent between bites of cold spaghetti. His mother, Elena, paced near the window, phone in hand. She had called a public defender she knew. He said he'd look into it. Across the table sat his father, Marcus Morris, quietly sipping his tea. He hadn't asked what happened. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't offer words of comfort. He just listened. That unnerved Jalen more than anything. "Dad," he finally said, "they lied." Marcus looked up. "I know. They said I resisted, that I had a blade. He never read me my rights." "I believe you." "So what do we do?" Marcus set down his cup. "We wait." Jalen's eyes narrowed. "That's it, wait." His father held his gaze. "There's more power in silence than rage, and more justice in patience than revenge." Jalen slammed his fork down. "I'm not interested in philosophy right now." Marcus stood, and for the first time since Jalen was a child, he lowered his voice to a whisper that held weight heavier than any shout. "Neither am I." Then he walked to his study and closed the door. In his study, Marcus opened his locked cabinet. Inside were files, notes, documents stamped with Department of Justice seals. At the top was a folder labeled Mercer Dwayne Pattern of Misconduct Pending DOJ Inquiry. He exhaled slowly. This wasn't just about his son anymore. It never had been. This was war. A quiet, lawful war. And Officer Mercer had no idea. He had just stepped into the wrong courtroom. The courtroom smelled like old wood, floor wax, and stale authority. Jalen Morris sat at the defense table beside a court-appointed public defender he had only met an hour ago. The man, Mr. Benson, was kind but distracted, flipping through a thin file of printed paperwork with too many redacted lines and not enough substance. Across the aisle sat Officer Dwayne Mercer, upright, crisp uniform, decorated enough to look respectable but not impressive enough to draw real scrutiny. He looked like every trustworthy cop ever pictured in a department brochure: square jaw, clean shave, calculated calm. Jalen's mother sat behind him, her jaw locked, hands gripping her purse like it was the only thing holding her together. His father wasn't there. The bailiff called order. The judge, an older white man with a tone like tired sandpaper, called the case forward. State of Illinois versus Jalen Marcus Morris. Charges: possession of a concealed weapon, obstruction of a lawful search, resisting arrest. Benson stood. Your Honor, the defense is prepared to argue that all charges are baseless and stem from a clear case of racial profiling. Is your client entering a plea? Jalen stood, his voice steady. Not guilty. The judge gave a disinterested nod. Proceed. The prosecutor called Officer Mercer to the stand. He strode up confidently, placed a hand on the Bible, and sat. What happened on the night of March 8th? The prosecutor asked. Mercer leaned in slightly, voice rehearsed. At approximately 6:03 p.m., I observed a vehicle driving slowly through a residential area with high crime activity. The driver matched a description given in a bolo alert earlier that day. Jalen clenched his jaw. Mercer continued. Upon approaching the vehicle, I observed the suspect reaching under the seat. I gave multiple verbal commands which he ignored. Upon removal from the vehicle, I located a sharpened metal object in his bag, what I considered a potential weapon. Did the suspect resist? He raised his voice, attempted to pull away. I followed department protocol to restrain him safely. And the object found, was it dangerous? It could have been used as a stabbing weapon. When Benson cross-examined, it was clear he wasn't ready for Mercer's calm performance. Officer Mercer, you stated you had a bolo alert. Can we see a copy? It was radio-based, no written record. So no physical proof the description existed? Mercer paused, then nodded. Correct. Benson stumbled. And this object, was it a knife? No, but it had a sharp edge and could penetrate skin. Was it a school pencil sharpener? Mercer smirked. With the blade exposed, yes. It was not in safe condition. The judge narrowed his eyes at Benson. Counsel, unless you have something substantial, this line of questioning is wasting time. Benson backed down. Jalen couldn't believe it. They were buying it. Outside the courtroom, cameras flashed. A local news van had caught wind of the case. Mrs. Morris shoved a microphone aside. No comment. Jalen followed her silently, shoulders slumped, fists clenched. Inside the courthouse lobby, Benson jogged to catch up. I'm sorry, I didn't expect the judge to. Fold? Jalen snapped. You let him say anything he wanted. I'm just your pretrial counsel, Benson said. If this goes to full trial, you'll be reassigned. Jalen turned to his mother. Where is he? She didn't answer. That evening, Marcus Morris didn't come home until nearly midnight. Jalen had waited on the couch, fully dressed, pacing every few minutes. When the door opened, he stood up immediately. Where were you? Marcus didn't answer. He locked the door, removed his coat, and went straight to the kitchen. He poured himself a glass of water. I needed you, Jalen said. I know. You weren't there. That guy lied in court, to my face. I know. And no one stopped him. Marcus turned, eyes sharp. No one stopped him yet. That word landed like a hammer. In the garage-turned office behind the house, Marcus opened a locked cabinet. He pulled out a slim folder marked Confidential, Doje's Civil Rights section. Inside were detailed complaints, some anonymous, some not, all linked to Officer Dwayne Mercer. Case 1. A 14-year-old boy stopped and searched without cause. Case 2. A single mother arrested for interfering when she recorded Mercer confronting her son. Case 3. A minor confessed to carrying drugs, no evidence ever found. Each case followed the same pattern. A black subject, vague suspicion, no body cam footage, and Mercer's word taken as gospel. Marcus pulled out a flash drive. On it, footage from a private home security camera on the street where Jalen was arrested. It showed Jalen driving normally, no erratic turns. Mercer pulling behind with lights flashing. Jalen pulling over immediately. Jalen stepping out with hands raised. No resistance, no reaching, no aggression. Marcus exhaled. This ends now. Marcus had friends in high places, but more importantly, he had respected enemies. He didn't need to announce himself. He needed only to nudge the system awake. He made 2 calls. First to the DOJ's Civil Rights Unit chief, second to a trusted journalist. "Keep this anonymous for now," he said. "But prepare your team. I'm coming to court next week, not as a father, as a federal prosecutor." 2 days later, Jalen sat alone on the bleachers after school. The gym was quiet. Practice had been canceled. One of his teammates approached. "Heard you got arrested, man. That true?" Jalen didn't answer. "People are saying crazy stuff, like your dad's some kind of lawyer." Jalen just stared ahead, then said quietly, "You'll see." There were things about Marcus Morris that even his son didn't know. To Jalen, his father was the man who drank lukewarm tea instead of coffee, who read legal briefs in silence while the rest of the world argued about everything, who rarely raised his voice, but when he did, the room obeyed. But to the United States Department of Justice, Marcus was known by another name, Special Prosecutor Marcus E. Morris, Section Chief, Civil Rights Division, Eastern Region. His jurisdiction? Police misconduct, judicial corruption, racial bias in law enforcement, and he had been building a case for nearly 9 months. Dwayne Mercer's name first crossed Marcus's desk after a disturbing spike in civilian complaints from the Fairview district. Most were dismissed internally before reaching any real review. But one file stuck out, a 16-year-old boy named Deshaun Milton. The arrest was labeled routine. Suspicious loitering, matched a vague description, later found with an unknown substance that mysteriously disappeared from evidence. Marcus smelled the same rot he'd encountered across a dozen jurisdictions. Unverifiable stops, missing footage, magically appearing weapons. He quietly sent a field agent to interview Deshaun's mother. She cried the entire time. Marcus knew better than to make noise. The system didn't fear shouting. It feared exposure, so he collected cell phone footage scrubbed from social media archives, internal review memos that never left the precinct, anonymous testimonies from rookie officers pressured to stay silent, and every thread led back to Officer Dwayne Mercer. Marcus didn't request a formal inquiry, not yet. Instead, he opted for pattern development. Once you prove a pattern, the DOJ could initiate civil action and open federal indictment proceedings. But then Mercer crossed a line he couldn't uncross. He arrested Marcus's son. Marcus stared at his reflection in the mirror that night, the house dark and silent. He had walked into courtrooms where senators trembled. He had once prosecuted a federal judge for obstruction of justice, and won. But this was his child. And that changed everything. He knew he couldn't directly prosecute Mercer for what happened to Jalen. Conflict of interest. But he could accelerate everything else. He could shine a light so blinding the whole machine would seize. Marcus picked up the phone and called someone he hadn't spoken to in years, Deputy Attorney General Alyssa Brandt. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Morris. Brandt, I need clearance to move early." "You talking about the Mercer case?" "Yes. I thought it was still in evidence gathering." "It was, until yesterday. Mercer arrested my son." A pause. "You sure you want to stay on this, Marcus? It's your family now." He didn't hesitate, "Which means now I have skin in the game. Literally." Another pause. "Then you have my authorization. Go federal." At breakfast the next morning, Jalen found his father already dressed, in a full charcoal gray suit, DOJ pin glinting at the collar. He hadn't worn it in months. "Where are you going?" Jalen asked. Marcus folded his newspaper and looked at his son. "To court." "You're coming today?" "I'm not just coming," Marcus said. "I'm entering." Jalen furrowed his brow. "As what?" Marcus gave a small smile. "As myself." Years ago, Marcus had been a public defender in Chicago's South Side, fighting for clients no one else cared about. He had defended men wrongly accused, children labeled criminal before puberty, and families too poor to afford even a second chance. But he grew tired of playing defense, so he crossed the aisle. As a federal prosecutor, he targeted those who abused the very laws he once used to shield the innocent. His philosophy was simple. You can't fix a system from outside the building. Now, the building was cracking from within, and his son was standing under its weight. When Marcus entered the courthouse that day, the guard at the door stood a little straighter. He walked past reporters without a word, flashed his credentials to the clerk, and stepped into Judge Halberd's courtroom as if he owned it. The prosecutor blinked. "Mr. Morris? I'm invoking Section 14141 of the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act," Marcus said calmly. "I have reason to believe this case involves a pattern of civil rights violations under color of law." Judge Halberd raised an eyebrow. "Do you have standing?" Marcus reached into his coat and handed over a sealed federal affidavit, signed by Deputy Attorney General Brandt. The courtroom fell into silence. Jalen watches his father become something else. From the defense table, Jalen watched his father with wide eyes. He had never seen him like this. Not angry, not loud, just powerful. Not just because of his title, because of who he had always been and what he had always carried. Justice didn't have to shout. Sometimes it walked in quietly and rearranged the room. The courtroom felt 10 degrees colder the moment Marcus Morris rose from his seat. He wasn't at the defense table. He wasn't sitting with his son. He now stood between the prosecution and the bench, in a tailored suit, DOJ seal pinned at his collar, holding a thin black folder with quiet certainty. "Your Honor," he said calmly, "as a representative of the U.S. Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, I respectfully request permission to cross-examine Officer Dwayne Mercer under federal authority." The prosecutor stood, clearly flustered. "Objection? Mr. Morris has a personal connection to the defendant." Marcus didn't flinch. "I have recused myself from all decisions regarding the defense of my son. However, under Section 14141, I'm here today to question a sworn officer who has already been under pending federal review, an inquiry that began long before this incident." Judge Halberd narrowed his eyes, weighing the weight of law against the sudden crack in protocol. He looked at Marcus. "Proceed." Officer Mercer adjusted his tie as he was sworn in once more. This time, his confidence had cracks. His eyes darted to the gallery, where whispers had begun swirling like wind in a cave. Local reporters furiously scribbled notes. Marcus stepped forward. "No theatrics, Officer Mercer. Just truth." Mercer smirked. "I've got nothing to hide." "Good," Marcus said. "Then let's begin with the Bolo alert you referenced in your initial report. Can you provide the time and dispatcher who issued it?" Mercer hesitated. "It was over the radio. I didn't get the badge number." "You don't recall the dispatcher, the description specifics, or a case number?" "It happens fast in the field." Marcus nodded. "Understood. So you can't verify that the vehicle Mr. Morris was driving matched any actual suspect?" Mercer shifted. "It was close enough to warrant a stop." "Close enough," Marcus repeated. "Now, onto the item you claimed was a weapon. What exactly did you find in Jalen Morris's gym bag?" "A metal object with a blade, potentially dangerous." Marcus stepped closer. "Was it in fact a pencil sharpener?" "With an exposed blade, yes." "Is that the kind commonly issued in public school kits?" "I wouldn't know." Marcus held up a clear evidence bag. Inside was the sharpener. No longer dangerous, just plastic, small, harmless. "For the record, this is what you submitted to evidence?" Mercer clenched his jaw. "That's it." Marcus turned to the judge. "Your Honor, this item is not a weapon. It's a common school supply. I move that this be recognized as non-lethal and irrelevant to the prosecution's claim of concealed weapon possession." The judge nodded. "Motion granted. The charge of possession of a weapon is hereby dismissed." A murmur spread across the courtroom. Jalen exhaled. His mother gripped her chest. But Marcus wasn't finished. "Officer Mercer," Marcus continued, voice colder, "you stated under oath that the suspect reached under his seat and resisted your commands. Is that still your sworn testimony?" "Yes," Mercer said, more hesitant now. Marcus walked to his briefcase and pulled out a small tablet. "I'd like to submit into evidence a video taken from a home security system at the address directly across the street from the scene of the arrest." He tapped play. The court's large monitor lit up. Everyone turned. The footage was crystal clear. Jalen's car moving at a normal speed. Mercer's cruiser pulling behind. Jalen stopping immediately, both hands visible on the wheel. Mercer approaching with his weapon already unholstered. Jalen is stepping out calmly, hands raised. No reaching. No resistance. Mercer grabbed him aggressively. The courtroom fell into dead silence. "Officer Mercer," Marcus said quietly, Where in this footage does the defendant reach under the seat? Mercer didn't answer. Where, in this footage, does he raise his voice, resist, or threaten you in any way? Still nothing. Marcus leaned in slightly. You lied under oath, officer, and this isn't the first time, is it? Objection, the prosecutor barked. Overruled, Judge Halberd said, his tone darkening. He may continue. Marcus placed a second folder on the evidence table. Your Honor, these are 7 civilian complaints filed against Officer Mercer over the past 4 years. 5 of them involved black minors. All of them were dismissed internally until now. He turned back to Mercer. In one case, you arrested a 15-year-old for suspicious loitering outside his own home. In another, you cited gang signs when a student was simply wearing his school's basketball jacket. You even arrested a young girl for obstruction because she recorded you yelling at her brother. Mercer's face was turning red. You're reaching, he said. Marcus raised an eyebrow. No, officer, you were, over and over, and now you've reached too far. At that moment, another figure rose from the back of the courtroom. A young woman in police blues. Your Honor, she said, stepping forward. May I speak? The judge looked surprised. State your name and position. Officer Talia Monroe, Fairview PD, badge 6721. She looked directly at Marcus. I'd like to give testimony. I've worked with Officer Mercer for 2 years. I've seen firsthand how he targets young black males. I've seen reports changed, videos lost, complaints buried. The judge paused. Are you under oath? I'm willing to be. Marcus stepped back and let her speak. Talia's voice was shaky, but clear. She told of whispered warnings from senior officers. At times, she'd tried to speak up and was told to stay quiet if she wanted to keep her job. Of how Mercer would smirk after arrests and say, another one off the street. Her words cracked something open, a truth too long buried under uniforms and silence. When she finished, the judge leaned back. He removed his glasses, pinched the bridge of his nose, and looked at the prosecutor. I suggest you drop the remaining charges, immediately. The prosecutor, now pale, turned to Marcus. Do you intend to pursue this federally? Marcus looked at Jalen, then said, loud enough for the room to hear. I already am. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Marcus ignored them. He placed a hand on Jalen's shoulder. I told you, he said, there's more power in silence until it's time to speak. Jalen looked up. You weren't quiet. You were gathering truth. Marcus nodded. Justice doesn't chase noise. It waits for precision. The arrest of Jalen Morris had started as a routine stop. Now it was national news. By the time the video from the home surveillance footage hit social media, the hashtags were already trending. Within 48 hours, civil rights groups called for a full federal probe into the Fairview Police Department. But this time, they weren't just asking. They had Marcus Morris. And he wasn't asking either. At the DOJ's regional headquarters, Marcus stood before a dozen federal attorneys, analysts, and enforcement liaisons. On the screen behind him were faces. Young, black, scared, or angry, from body cam footage, civilian recordings, and court transcripts. This isn't about one officer, Marcus said. This is about a system that learned to look away. A system that doesn't break when abused. It adapts to protect the abuser. He pointed to a list of dismissed complaints. These weren't weak claims. They were deliberately buried, and the same names appear across multiple cases. Same prosecutors, same judges, same internal affairs reviews. One agent, a tall woman from D.C., leaned forward. Are you suggesting judicial collusion? I'm not suggesting, Marcus replied. I'm building the case. While Mercer was placed on immediate administrative leave, his fall triggered something deeper. Officer Talia Monroe, the young woman who'd spoken out in court, became a quiet hero online. Anonymous officers began contacting her, offering to speak if granted protection. One message stood out. There's a Dropbox Mercer uses. He brags about it. Keeps clean and dirty versions of his body cam uploads. Ask IT. Another led them to a leaked memo from the department's internal affairs unit. It read, if DOJ makes contact, delay all disclosures. Route everything through Commander Rayburn. Do not admit to the pattern. Blame individual officer conduct. The memo was dated 2 days before Jalen's arrest. At a hastily arranged press conference, Police Chief Randall Rayburn stood before a sea of microphones. He looked tired, unprepared. We take all allegations seriously, he began. But we believe in due process, and Officer Mercer, like all our officers, is entitled to a fair review. A reporter shouted from the back, "What about the hidden footage? What about the altered reports?" Another added, "How long have you known about this pattern?" Rayburn's hands trembled slightly. "This department, this city, we are not perfect, but we stand by our people." He walked off without taking further questions. The headlines the next day were brutal. Fairview PD in crisis, Chief ducks accountability as DOJ closes in. 1 week later, a federal grand jury convened. Marcus wasn't allowed to lead the prosecution due to a conflict of interest. But he submitted an airtight 17-page dossier compiled over months of research, now armed with fresh witness statements, video evidence, and whistleblower testimony. The charges included conspiracy to obstruct justice, suppression of evidence, violation of civil rights under color of law, retaliation against whistleblowers. Names were listed, not just Mercer, not just Rayburn, but 2 assistant district attorneys, a retired judge, and 1 senior detective who had signed off on over 20 identical false arrest affidavits. While the legal battle escalated, so did the streets. But this time, there was no chaos. There were thousands of people marching quietly, holding signs with faces, Jalen's, Deshaun's, and others who never got their day in court. At the front of the march was a sign that simply read, "Silence is a sentence." That week, Marcus was invited to speak at the National Civil Rights Summit in Atlanta. He stood before senators, educators, activists, and grieving mothers from across the country. He didn't speak like a prosecutor. He spoke like a father. "My son could have been another hashtag," he said, "but he had something rare. Not privileged, not power. He had proof, but thousands of others don't. That's why we're not done." Under public and legal pressure, Chief Rayburn resigned, citing health reasons. Mercer, after being indicted, was taken into custody. During the booking, he refused to speak, but behind the scenes, he tried to cut a deal. "If I talk, I want immunity." The DOJ rejected it. "You don't get to dismantle lives and then negotiate your way out." Instead, 2 of Mercer's former partners agreed to testify, one of whom had been promoted for performance excellence after falsifying 3 separate reports. Amid the chaos, one night was still. The Morris family sat at the table together. No reporters, no headlines, just food, warmth, and the gravity of something bigger than themselves. Jalen poked his fork into his pasta. "Are we safe?" Marcus looked at him. "Yes." Elena reached across the table and squeezed her son's hand. "You were never unsafe because of who you are. You were unsafe because they forgot who you are." Jalen nodded slowly. "But they remember now." In a rare move, Judge Halberd, who presided over Jalen's initial hearing, released a public statement. "I've reviewed my own actions in light of recent events. I regret accepting Officer Mercer's account without proper scrutiny. I vow to support reforms that restore the integrity of this courtroom." The Bar Association launched an internal review of multiple judicial officers in Fairview County. 1 assistant DA was placed on leave. The chain was unraveling, link by link. 3 weeks later, the U.S. Attorney General held a press conference with Marcus standing silently behind her. "We are launching a full federal consent decree on the Fairview Police Department. We will review every policy, every procedure, and every case tied to racial bias or abuse of authority." She turned to Marcus, "And we thank Prosecutor Morris for his persistence and his restraint." After the cameras shut off, a junior reporter asked him, "Mr. Morris, how does it feel to win?" He looked at her quietly. "This isn't a win. This is a beginning." The courtroom was gone. The headlines were quiet, but Jalen Morris still carried the weight of it all in his chest. Every hallway at school felt different now. Not because people stared, not because they whispered, but because they knew. The lie had been exposed, and something sacred had shifted. Not just for him, but for all the kids who looked like him. They weren't just students anymore. They were witnesses. The spring sun poured through the gymnasium windows on the day of graduation. The bleachers overflowed with parents and siblings, many of whom had followed Jalen's story like a series on the news. The school's principal, once politely distant, now stood beaming as he introduced the valedictorian. "Please welcome Mr. Jalen Morris." A standing ovation met him before he reached the podium. Jalen adjusted the mic, cleared his throat. He held no notes, no paper, just the truth. "I wasn't supposed to be standing here," he began. "A few months ago, I was sitting in a holding cell, accused of something I didn't do by someone who thought no one would care." He paused, and for a while, I thought no one would. The crowd hushed. But then something happened. My father walked into that courtroom, not with anger, not with fists, not with shouting. He walked in with proof, with the law, with his spine straight and his words sharper than any weapon. He scanned the crowd. He didn't just fight for me. He fought for the ones whose names you'll never hear, the ones who didn't have video or a badge in the family or a lawyer who shares their last name. Applause broke out. Jalen smiled gently. And to every kid out there who's ever been told they look suspicious, walk proud anyway, because the truth is, you don't need to look like anything to be someone. He stepped back. And the gym erupted. Marcus Morris sat in the front row, Elena's hand in his. His face was calm, but behind his eyes was fire, gratitude, and something else. Resolve. That night after dinner, he sat on the porch with Jalen. The stars above were scattered and soft, and the night was the first peaceful one they'd shared in months. "I didn't know you could speak like that," Marcus said. Jalen grinned. "Guess I learned it from you." Marcus nodded. Then his smile faded slightly. "I failed you for a moment, son." "No," Jalen said firmly. "You didn't. You just moved in silence until the room was ready." They sat in silence, letting the wind do the talking. In the weeks that followed, reforms began to take root. A civilian review board with subpoena power was established in Fairview. A new Body Cam Accountability Act was passed through the state assembly. Youth advocacy centers saw a spike in donations, including a 6-figure check signed anonymously, in honor of Jalen M. Marcus returned to work not just as a prosecutor, but as a mentor. He launched an initiative called Courtside, pairing black high school students with legal mentors to teach them how the justice system really worked and how to fix it. When asked what inspired the name, Marcus simply said, "Because too many of our kids are watching justice from the sidelines. I want them in the game." Talia, the young officer who spoke out in court, was offered a promotion and a transfer to the department's brand new Community Integrity Division. She accepted, but on one condition. "I don't want to supervise. I want to train." Now, every new officer watched the full recording of Jalen's arrest and her testimony during ethics orientation. One trainee cried, one walked out, most stayed, some changed. 6 months later, Dwayne Mercer sat in the same courtroom where he once lied. Only this time, he was the defendant. He pleaded guilty to multiple charges, including perjury, falsifying evidence, deprivation of rights under color of law. The judge sentenced him to 9 years in federal prison. During sentencing, Mercer stared straight ahead. But just before he was led away, his eyes flicked toward Marcus in the gallery. Marcus didn't blink. Justice wasn't vengeance. Justice was balanced. Jalen's story began appearing in law journals, educational materials, and even political ads. But Marcus didn't care about the spotlight. He cared about replication. Using the Fairview model, the DOJ launched 3 new investigations in other districts with patterns similar to Mercer's. Marcus oversaw 2 of them. And at each one, he said the same thing. One case won't change a nation, but it can start a map. 1 year after the arrest, Jalen returned to the park where it all began. Same hoodie, same shoes, taller now. He sat on a bench with a notebook in his hand. He was writing, not lyrics, not essays, a speech for incoming freshmen at the law internship program he'd just been accepted into. His first line, "I don't trust systems. I trust people who choose to make them better." On a national panel discussion about police reform, Marcus was asked one last question. "Do you think justice has been served?" He paused, then answered, "Justice isn't a moment. It's a movement. Justice isn't loud. It's consistent. And justice doesn't always look like punishment. Sometimes it looks like a 17-year-old black boy walking across a graduation stage, free."